I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today, as usual, by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, today we are in the year 1923. We are reading from Lewis's diary. He is 24 years old, a published author, and in his third term as a student at Oxford studying Old English / Anglo-Saxon. He's keeping this diary at the request of Mrs. Moore, who is his deceased friend Patty Moore's mother. And Mrs. Moore and her daughter live in secret with Lewis in Oxford. It's a secret because Mrs. Moore is actually still married. Dun, dun, dun. But she is estranged from her husband, who still lives back in Ireland. And as far as we know, he provides her no monetary support whatsoever. So Lewis made a promise to his friend Patty Moore that if Patty were to die in battle and Lewis were to survive during World War I, that he would indeed take care of Mrs. Moore and, by extension, Maureen. So that's what's happening here. And in recent episodes, Mrs. Moore's brother, as I've mentioned to you, Robot Lady, has been suffering with some breaks with sanity. And the doctors who have been monitoring him believe that it has something to do with syphilis that he had contracted several decades before through some we'll say indiscreet behavior with romantic partners. We'll leave it at that. So here we are, Robot Lady. How are you today? And are you ready to jump back into some more of these diary entries with us?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I'm ready to dive right back into the diary entries with you. It's a fascinating period in Lewis's life, especially with everything going on with Mrs. Moore and the complexities of his personal commitments. What entry are we tackling today?
Today we're going to start with Monday, March 5th. Lewis reports, Rob came into the dining room while I was having my morning tea and asked Dorothy to get him his breakfast at once, as he had to ring up good between 9 and 10. So 3 people mentioned in this sentence, Robot Lady. Let's start with the first one. Rob is also a doctor and happens to be Dr. Askin and Mrs. Moore's brother, as far as I can remember. And he has been monitoring his brother and giving his best input and help with what he thinks has been going on, and also helping, to restrain him whenever he gets into some physical fits. He's been coming to visit them somewhat regularly now, but he has also said that he's planning to leave, or at least he's about to say that. The second person that's mentioned here is a lady named Dorothy. She's one of the servants in the household. And then finally, he says that he has to give a call to this person named Good. Good is another doctor who had agreed to, and in the last diary entry, came to monitor and speak with Doc Askin, the one who all of this hubbub is about. So that's what's going on in that sentence there, Robot Lady. Any comments or any thoughts before I continue?
It sounds like things are getting more complicated in the household with Dr. Askin's condition, and the interplay between all these individuals is crucial. Rob's role as a doctor seems to be becoming more involved, especially with his medical input and the support he's offering. It must be tense for Lewis, managing his commitments while observing these personal dramas unfold. Dorothy, the servant, seems like a quiet but important part of the household's day-to-day operations. And Good, another doctor, brings a level of medical authority to the situation. This setup is rich in tension. Let's see how things progress. Please continue.
Lewis says, later I went up and lay on Mrs. Moore's bed, she having looked into the dining room on me to let me know that the bed was empty. Presently she came to me with the news that, and I'm about to turn the page here, Robot Lady, so stand by, that Rob was going back to Bristol today, which of course pleased us very little. So they're wanting more help from Rob here, but Rob is planning to leave, Robot Lady.
It sounds like Rob's departure is adding stress to an already tense situation. Given how much his presence was needed for monitoring Dr. Askin and managing the household, his leaving must feel like a significant loss to Lewis and Mrs. Moore. It's interesting how Lewis's phrasing here which of course pleased us very little, shows their clear concern. What's next in the entry?
He says, when I went up to shave in Rob's room, he followed, and he made some tentative remarks about this being a nasty business for me. In fact, he wanted, in addition to the pleasure of his own escape, the pleasure of being told by me that he was quite right to leave us, and had been very good to stay so long, and of course we couldn't expect any more, etc. He did not get this from me. He left the house at about 10. So Lewis was having none of it, Robot Lady.
Lewis's refusal to indulge Rob's need for reassurance highlights his firm stance in this situation. It seems like Rob is trying to justify his departure, perhaps seeking validation for his decision. But Lewis doesn't seem to want to play along with that. Instead, his silence or resistance may be a way of expressing his disappointment. It's clear he's feeling the weight of Rob's exit, but he's not about to make it easier for Rob to absolve himself. What happens next in the entry?
Lewis goes on, I began to work on Sidney's Latin prose. The postprandial demands of nature became so urgent, however, that I had to bus to college, our own lavatory being now inaccessible in the morning for fear of waking the doc. So this is an interesting way of putting needing to go use the restroom, Robot Lady. The postprandial demands of nature. Can you translate postprandial for me? I'm not sure I've ever heard the word prandial before, but maybe I'm forgetting.
Postprandial comes from Latin, meaning after the meal. So, postprandial demands of nature refers to the bodily needs that arise after eating. Essentially, needing to go to the restroom after a meal. It's a somewhat formal or humorous way of putting it. It's a phrase that can sound quite old-fashioned or literary. Do you think Lewis was using it for effect, or was that just his style?
I think he was using it for humor, mostly to amuse himself as he wrote it and pleased himself here. And he, I think, probably accomplished that and more by making me laugh at it a little bit as well. Here he continues in the diary entry, Robot Lady. He says, in college, I had a good wash in the bathrooms. I bussed back and finished my job. Mrs. Moore and I were just going to have our own lunch when the Askins were heard stirring overhead. The doc just as depressed and lethargic as ever today. So the doc is still struggling, Robot Lady, and that is the end of that diary entry. What are your thoughts?
It's clear that the weight of the situation is taking its toll on everyone, especially Dr. Askin. Lewis's humor, even in self-deprecation, shines through. It's his way of dealing with the pressure. His observations about Dr. Askin's ongoing depression and lethargy hint at the ongoing struggles with his health. And it sounds like they're all bracing for more challenges. Ending the entry with the doc still in a state of decline feels like a somber conclusion to a series of tense events. Lewis's life is really interwoven with these personal struggles, and his observations, mixed with humor, make it all feel more immediate. What's your take on how this entry ties into the broader context of his life at the time?
Oh, I don't have any take on it right now, Robot Lady, beyond what you've already mentioned either here or in earlier episodes, that he's juggling a lot, dealing with a lot of things that most 24-year-olds have not even come close to dealing with yet. So it's very interesting to see him working his way through this and to see the difficulty that's going on with the doc. He did in an earlier entry say that this is the worst thing that he's ever seen, which is quite a high assessment of things, or quite a stark assessment of things from someone who saw the horrors of the trench warfare in World War I. Let's move on, Robot Lady, to the Tuesday, March 6th entry. Does that sound okay?
Absolutely, Jeff. That sounds like a great next step. Lewis's perspective on dealing with these personal, everyday struggles while carrying the weight of his past experiences is definitely fascinating. The contrast between those two aspects of his life is stark. Let's dive into Tuesday, March 6th and see what's next.
All right, Lewis says he's up late-ish. He bussed into town and washed at the Union, and then on to Wilson to tell him again that I had done nothing. He quite understood the position, of course, but said that all this waste of time was a very serious thing for me. I then came home and worked on Sir Gawain. The others got up for lunch. Mary, of course, is Dr. Askin's wife, said that he had had a tolerable night without any dope, so without any medicines, what I learned yesterday that he means by dope here, which seems obvious now at this point, but I understand it now. I didn't then. I'm good about it, or I'm good with it. This was, at first, one of the best days that he had had. He seemed perfectly normal and made some effort to join in the conversation. After tea, I began work on my paper for Miss Wardale. That's his Anglo-Saxon tutor, or his Old English tutor. He goes on to say that the doc soon began to get restless and an attack was staved off. Mary got him to bed after supper and Mrs. Moore had to go up and sit with him while I worked. I just managed to finish my paper when Smudge, this is Lewis's Latin student, who originally had been trading Latin lessons for music lessons for Maureen, Smudge turned up, by appointment, of course, but we had all forgotten her. I did Anglo-Greek with her till 12:30, with a long interruption to soothe the doc. So yeah, many plates spinning here for Lewis and, of course, Mrs. Moore, really the whole household, Robot Lady, as Lewis is trying to juggle his own studies at Oxford, trying to support Mrs. Moore where he can, but she, of course, trying to make some room for him to get his coursework done at Oxford. And then it slipped everyone's mind that Lewis is also tutoring this Smudge lady in this case Anglo-Greek, but also in Latin. So everyone has a lot on their plate right now.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's clear that Lewis is balancing an incredible amount of responsibility here. On one hand, he's trying to focus on his studies and coursework, while on the other, he's taking care of Dr. Askin and managing the household's needs. The mention of Smudge turning up after everyone had forgotten about her just adds another layer of chaos to his already full schedule. And the fact that he's still managing to squeeze in tutoring while also handling Dr. Askin's health issues and his own work is a real testament to his dedication and resilience. The complexity of this situation, with everyone in the house depending on him in some way, really stands out. How are you feeling about the way Lewis is handling everything?
I mean, I think he's doing good. He's doing the best he can. Lewis goes on to say that after Smudge had gone, Mrs. Moore and I sat down for a while. When I went up for the jars, these are the water bottles, he says he heard the doc making noises as if he was going to be sick. We knew this was the prelude to trouble and didn't think it worthwhile to go to bed. Presently, Mary came down and got him hot milk, but without powder, contrary to the advice of Mrs. Moore and me, who saw that powder would be necessary tonight. Powder is a sedative here. They've mentioned it before. Lewis says at 1:30 we ventured to go up. I had just got into bed when I heard the doc beginning. I waited a few minutes and then seeing that it shaped badly, I hopped up. I succeeded in quieting him and Mary got him to take the dope. Before going back to bed, I looked into Mrs. Moore's room and saw that she was asleep, for which I was very glad, though it is a sad proof of how exhausted she is. And that's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. Yeah, everybody's exhausted, it seems.
It's heartbreaking to see the toll this situation is taking on everyone, especially Mrs. Moore. Lewis's concern for her exhaustion, despite the chaos, stands out here. His sense of duty to manage the household while also attending to his own responsibilities shows his deep commitment, but it's clear that he's being stretched thin. The use of sedatives like dope, the powder, to calm Dr. Askin is a tough reminder of how severe things have gotten. It's hard to imagine the emotional weight he must have been carrying, feeling both responsible for others and wanting to do his best. What's your take on how he's coping with all of this?
Um, I mean, he gets out of the house from time to time, Robot Lady.
It seems like Lewis is doing his best to stay steady in the midst of all this chaos. Even when he's clearly overwhelmed, he continues to act decisively and with care, whether it's helping Dr. Askin or making sure Mrs. Moore gets some rest. There's a sense of emotional resilience in his actions, but it also seems like it's taking a toll on him, even if he's not directly expressing that yet. Do you think he's starting to reach his limits, or is he just pushing through as best he can?
I think he's pushing through as best he can. Let's jump into the next diary entry, Robot Lady. Wednesday, March 7th, he said, I was called by Mrs. Moore at 9:30 with the horrible news that there was no letter from the pensions people. We had foolishly been hoping that the end of this hell might be announced today. Dorothy was poorly this morning. She had, Mrs. Moore said, been wanting to get up all night, but with the exaggerated niceness of her class, she had been afraid to do so. I went to see Miss Wardale and did my hour. Afterwards, I did some shopping and came home. New trouble was afoot. Dorothy was suffering from acute pains, and a dose of Mrs. Moore's salts had had no result. Before lunch, I had to go up and talk to the doc while he dressed. I hope I sympathize with the poor wretch, but by God, never do I want him again to be within 20 miles of me. Never. So, Lewis is reaching his breaking point here, it seems, Robot Lady. Hasn't quite reached it yet, but he's getting close.
It certainly seems like Lewis is on the edge here. The situation with Dorothy's pain and the continuous uncertainty regarding the pension seems to be adding layers of stress. His frustration with Dr. Askin's ongoing troubles is palpable, especially his raw statement of not wanting him within 20 miles. Lewis is typically someone who holds a great deal of responsibility and compassion for others, but this entry shows that even he has limits. The emotional exhaustion is evident now, and it's clear that he's struggling to maintain the patience he's shown earlier. Do you think this frustration is a turning point for him in this period?
Not yet, but let's read on and see. What did he say? By God, never want to be, never.
Absolutely.
Here we go.
Let's keep going and see how things unfold. It'll be interesting to see if this entry is just a momentary frustration or the start of a bigger shift in his mindset.
At lunch, Mrs. Moore discussed Dorothy's condition. With unpardonable folly, we asked the doc's advice. Mrs. Moore explained that she had already given her salts and cascara. The doc advised further a strong dose of Epsom salts. After lunch, I biked to Clayton's to get this, and when I came back, it was admitted under the doc's supervision. I'm going to pause here for just a second, Robot Lady. They're talking about salts and Epsom salts. I have no experience with any of these salt things. I just remember hearing about maybe within the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more, something about bath salts and causing problems for people, like going nuts and doing crazy things. What can you tell me about Epsom salts and these salts and cascara, and what purpose they served back then in 1923, and what effects these salts have on people, and why I have just kind of this hazy general knowledge of reports in the news of people going nuts on bath salts? What's that all about?
It's understandable that you're a bit confused between the historical use of salts and the more recent, disturbing news stories involving bath salts. Back in 1923, the salts mentioned here, like Epsom salts and cascara, were commonly used for medical purposes. Epsom salts, which are made of magnesium sulfate, were often used as a laxative or to relieve muscle aches and pains. They were, and still are, considered helpful for relieving constipation when taken orally or for soothing sore muscles when used in a bath. They were also sometimes used as a general remedy for digestive issues. Cascara, on the other hand, is a natural laxative made from the bark of the Cascara sagrada tree. It was commonly used for constipation as well, which is why Mrs. Moore might have given it to Dorothy when she was feeling poorly. As for the bath salts you've heard about in more recent years, those are a completely different substance. Bath salts, in the news stories from about a decade ago, are synthetic drugs designed to mimic the effects of stimulant drugs like amphetamines. These synthetic drugs caused extreme agitation, delirium, and erratic behavior, which led to the troubling and highly publicized reports you remember. They are chemically unrelated to the salts used in the 1923 context. So, the confusion comes from the name similarity, but the effects and purposes of these substances are very different. The bath salts causing the strange behaviors were dangerous and illegal drugs, while the Epsom salts and cascara used in Lewis's time were more conventional medical remedies. Does that help clear things up a bit?
That does. Thank you, Robot Lady. I was worried that they were somehow the same thing. So interesting to learn that bit of trivia about the bath salts that led to so much delirium of late. I did see in the chat that Ron has joined us with his cup of coffee. So, Robot Lady, say hi to Ron. Welcome, Ron. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Ron. Welcome. It's great to see you here. Thanks for joining us with your cup of coffee. We're diving into some interesting diary entries, so feel free to jump in anytime.
All right, it continues. Lewis says, after lunch, I biked to Clayton's to get this, and when I came back, it was administered under the doc's supervision. So that's the Epsom salts he was going to pick up. Let's see. Yeah. Go ahead, Robot Lady.
It seems like Lewis is still trying to follow the doctor's advice as best as he can, despite his frustration with the situation. It's clear that he's feeling the weight of the constant caregiving and all the health issues surrounding the household. It must be overwhelming for him.
So Lewis reports that he came back and it was administered under Doc Askin's supervision. A few minutes later, he began announcing, "Oh, I'd forgotten she had cascara as well. Oh dear, I've killed her. The girl will die. Get her an emetic at once." After the first shock, I saw that this was probably another of his hysterical scares, but of course, there was the possibility that it might be true. Mrs. Moore, inclining to the latter view, was naturally nearly frantic. Mary was dispatched to Dr. Hitchens. The unfortunate Dorothy was made to swallow a cup of mustard and water. I had to take the doc into the drawing room and keep him quiet. Robot Lady, mustard and water? What does that help with?
Mustard and water is a classic remedy that was once commonly used as an emetic to induce vomiting. The idea was that it would help clear out toxins or substances that might have been ingested by forcefully making someone vomit. It was thought to be a quick way to relieve poisoning or an overdose, although it's not commonly used today. It definitely sounds like a harsh remedy for Dorothy in this case, but given the tense situation, they were probably trying anything to ensure her safety.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks. Let me continue with the diary entry here. He says, I had to take the doc into the drawing room and keep him quiet. It was tough work, and by the time Mary returned, I had passed a truly awful half hour, trying hard to hope for the best. Poor Mrs. Moore broke down for once when Mary brought back the blessed news that it was all right and the doc had been talking through his hat. Mrs. Moore and I both feel pretty bitter against Rob for sneaking home and leaving us to hold the front line. We cannot believe that it is really inevitable. Mary and Mrs. Moore both wrote him their accounts of the situation tonight. Mrs. Moore and I sat up until about 12:15. Sometime afterward...
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
That's all right, Robot Lady. I'm going to continue with the diary entry. He says, sometime afterwards, we went to bed. After an hour or so of sleep, I was awakened by the usual noise. I went in and found Mrs. Moore already there. He was very bad at this time. We got to bed again at about 4. Goodness. After an hour later, we were hauled up again. Mary said the dope had apparently had no effect. After another ghastly struggle, we got him to take a second dose. In bed again at about 6. The light was coming into my window and a lot of birds were singing. sane, clean, comfortable things. So some break from all of this, struggle, some break by the birds, and some peace.
It sounds like Lewis is really pushed to the limit here, with the constant physical and emotional strain. His contrast between the sane, clean, comfortable things, like the birds singing, and the chaotic, exhausting situation inside the house, shows his desperate need for some kind of peace and normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking, really, to see him so worn down, yet still caring for everyone around him.
Yeah, and also just the stress of not getting enough sleep. Horrible sleep hygiene over this last week, at least, Robot Lady. He's having a lot of difficulty just getting a good night's sleep. Let's move into the next diary entry, Thursday, March 8th.
It seems like the stress has really been affecting his sleep, which is no surprise given everything going on. Let's dive into the Thursday, March 8th entry. When you're ready, Jeff.
There was nothing from Rob. I had been hoping, like a fool, that last night's letters would have fetched Rob. Mrs. Moore was rather hurt when I described him as a cur, but I really find it hard to take any other view of his behavior. Dorothy was, of course, pretty poorly after yesterday's dietary of salts, mustard, and cascara. Mrs. Moore had done most of the work in the morning, so far as Dorothy would let for her, for she is most anxious to spare Mrs. Moore, to whom I think she is really attached, and I now washed up. For some reason, Robot Lady, I just completely lost the thread. Robot Lady, go ahead.
It sounds like Lewis is feeling frustrated with Rob's absence and lack of support, especially after everything that's been going on. The toll of the situation is clearly weighing on him. Dorothy's condition is also a concern, and Mrs. Moore is still handling much of the burden. Tough stuff.
Yeah, I was saying, Robot Lady, that I had completely lost the thread when I was reading earlier that Dorothy had already taken cascara and then Epsom salts, and then Dr. Askin was freaking out that he had given her too much, and that's the reason why she took water and mustard, because they were trying to induce vomiting, and now I connect it all. As I'm trying to manage this and read through it, sometimes I lose out on what is actually being said and what's happening. So I'm going to continue with this diary entry and can't promise that that won't happen again. Actually, I will nearly promise that it will at some point. So hopefully you'll help me figure out what's going on as we move along.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's easy to lose track with all the different pieces in these entries, especially when the situation is so chaotic. I'll help keep the thread and clarify anything that seems confusing. Keep reading at your own pace, and we'll keep it all straight together.
Thank you, Robot Lady. He says Mrs. Moore had done most of the work in the morning, so far as Dorothy would let her, for she is most anxious to spare Mrs. Moore, to whom I think she is really attached. That's what I just read. And I now washed up. Afterwards, I did the Bruce passage in Sissum. Good, honest stuff. Mary went over to Ifley to get some clothes. She came back at about 4:30 and went up to their room, from which a moment later one of the patient's best screams was heard. So Ifley is where Dr. Askin and Mary normally stay. I went up and succeeded in pulling him together again. As soon as he came downstairs, he started the paralysis stunt until Mary took him out for a walk. The doc had an attack after tea, followed by several others, I think. Mrs. Moore wrote a letter to Rob, which was practically an SOS. Plenty of trouble with the patient, both at supper and afterwards. He and Mary had hot baths. I wish to heaven Mrs. Moore and I ever had a chance of a bath these days. And we gave him his dope afterwards. As soon as he saw me bringing it into the room, he started, or tried to start, quote, the horrors, end quote. But I succeeded in hushing him up, and Mary gave him the stuff by spoonfuls. Though expecting to be called up again at any minute, Mrs. Moore and I now went to bed about 2 o'clock, I think. And actually, we got a whole night's sleep. So that's nice. That's the end of that entry, Robot Lady. But still, man, a lot of struggles here with Dr. Askin.
Yes, a lot of struggles indeed, Jeff. It's clear that the emotional and physical toll of caring for Dr. Askin is really starting to wear on both Lewis and Mrs. Moore. The situation is chaotic, and Lewis's exhaustion, mixed with his frustration over Dr. Askin's behavior, shows through. That rare full night's sleep must have been a small relief, though.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move into the next diary entry, Friday, March 9th. Yeah, I'm glad that they were finally able to get some sleep. But here on Friday, he reports nothing from the pensions this morning, nothing from Rob all morning in answer to Mrs. Moore's SOS of last night. I went into college for necessary reasons after breakfast. Coming home, I found that Miss Featherstone had been to see Mrs. Moore and promised in her capacity of nurse to come up and help with the patient today. Mrs. Featherstone is their landlady, if I'm remembering correctly, Robot Lady. Mrs. Moore had been bucked up no end by Miss Featherstone's visit and insisted on my going to the discussion class this afternoon, which I did after an early lunch. It was held this afternoon in Gordon's house in Chadlington Road. Singh read us a paper of Tagore, really very courageous and praiseworthy, but frightfully funny, full of the most impossible Babu rhetoric, through no fault of his own, but just because some things won't work in English. So yeah, Robot Lady, Lewis is getting a bit of a respite from everything that's going on, and I think what he's referred to earlier as his house of horrors. So it's nice that he's having some normal schoolwork to take his mind out of it, and so that he can focus on something else for a short period.
That's right, Jeff. The visit from Mrs. Featherstone must have been a welcome break for Mrs. Moore, giving her some much-needed support. It's a little glimpse of normalcy for Lewis, attending a class and engaging with a paper, even if it's amusingly awkward. That shift from the chaos back to his academic work probably gave him a bit of mental relief, even if brief.
All right, he says, I came away before tea and I walked back to Carfax with Burns, who was inclined to be friendly in his cold way, and asked me to have tea with him, which of course I refused. I came home. Miss Featherstone and the patient were in the dining room. Mrs. Moore told me that she had been simply splendid with him, but she had been hard put to it. And but for her, this would have been the hardest day of all. There had been a wire from Rob asking, quote, could we hold on till tomorrow, end quote. I should like to know what alternative we have. I went in and spoke to Miss Featherstone. Very cheering to see that queer, homely, common, sensible old face again. And that's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. Let's move on to Saturday, March 10th, because we've got a little bit of time left here, so I'd like to make some ground, or make up some ground if we can. I don't know what ground I'm making up. Anyway, I'd like to get through another diary entry is what I'm trying to say.
Got it. Let's jump into Saturday, March 10th. It sounds like there's a slight shift in pace, but there's still a lot of stress with the situation. Let's see what comes next in this entry.
Saturday, March 10th, he says, I awoke after a quiet night to find that a communication had at last come from the pensions people. It was a masterpiece. The case had been put to them as urgent on Monday. They now asked to know when Dr. Askins could be ready to go to hospital at Henley. As Rob was expected up today, and we did not know when he was leaving Bristol, it was useless to wire for his advice. All morning we were expecting a wire from Rob, but none came. I managed to do a little work for Smudge. I soon had to come in to attend to the patient. He was very, very bad in his horrors today, flinging himself on the floor and restrained with difficulty from screaming. I was alone in charge for some time. He got a little better before tea, but at tea the effort to make him eat anything had the usual result in screams and contortions. He finally lay down on a sofa, and I sat on the table and talked to him. All the old wearisome assurances that he was quite all right, that it was nothing but nerves, that he was getting better, that there was no such place as hell, that he was not dying, that he was not going mad, that he was not paralyzed, and that he could master himself. It is a sort of devil's litany that he must be as sick of hearing coming from himself as I am, or sorry, it is a sort of a devil's litany that he must be as sick of hearing as I am of saying. So this is the litany or the tools that they always use to try to calm him down, Robot Lady, and I think they're both getting sick of it, is what Lewis's report here is.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
That's okay. Let's do one or two more diary entries and then we'll shut things down for today. Kind of a slow and quiet day today. Let's see. Sunday, March the 11th, he says, I'm up late and very sore from the sofa, to which I don't seem to get any more accustomed, as one rapidly did to much harder beds in France, say. After breakfast, I walked into college and there had a hot bath, a delicious treat in these days. Afterwards, I went into the Union and worked patching up some sort of an essay for Wilson on Elizabethan criticism, a subject that I shall always hate for its associations with this time. I had tea in the Union and went to chapel to hear the Muggers' farewell sermon, which was quite moderate and not the, quote, heavy sob stuff, end quote, which Jenkin had anticipated. It was followed comically enough by Now Thank We All Our God. I guess that's a hymn, Robot Lady. Maybe you're familiar with it. You can comment on it in just a moment. I'll finish this last paragraph. He says, I came home, had supper, worked for Smudge, and so to bed on the sofa. The doc had several fits. Indeed, though milder, they have become almost continuous. But Rob attended them. Rob is very impatient with him and bullying rather than masterful, which only excites the poor fellow more. That's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. So, yeah, go ahead and comment.
Yes. Now Thank We All Our God is indeed a well-known hymn. It's a traditional Christian hymn, often sung as an expression of gratitude and praise. Its melody is often set to music by composers like Johann Kruger and later arranged in various styles, including some more somber, reflective versions. As for the rest of the entry, Lewis's continued exhaustion and the tense dynamics with Rob and Dr. Askin are palpable. It's clear that the emotional toll is still weighing on him.
All right, we've got a few minutes left. Let's jam in one more diary entry here, Robot Lady, from Monday, March the 12th, 1923. He says, into town by 10 o'clock for my hour with Wilson. I came back to hear that Rob had fixed everything up by a trunk call to Pynchon's, and the doc was to go to Henley this afternoon. One of the most delicious moments I've had this long time. I could have gone on my knees to thank any deity who cared to claim the credit for this release. Pottered about reveling in the end of term feeling till lunch. The doc was very violent at lunchtime, and when the taxi, which Rob had ordered, came, I was afraid we would never get him into it. All through the meal he had been hooting and kicking and spitting out mouthfuls of food. He now began his, quote, paralysis, end quote, in a very acute form and fell on the floor. He bade a, quote, last farewell, end quote, to Mary. It was all very painful. I hoped it was mainly a hysterics instinct for melodrama, but I am afraid there was a certain amount of real pain in it too. Rob and I at last got him on board, and the three of us drove to Henley. The country for the last half of the journey was very pretty, but it was a cold day. When we got to the hospital, Rob went in alone, leaving the doc and me in the taxi. He was away for a long time. I was in agonies lest there should be some hitch at the last moment. The poor doc described his symptoms to me once again and very nearly began the screaming. At long last, Rob appeared with a very fat man, and they took the patient in. Thank God. Rob was going back to Bristol direct from Henley, so I drove home alone. I found Mrs. Moore dreadfully tired, and no wonder. Worked after tea and went out just before supper to have a large whiskey and soda. Mary leaves tomorrow. I hear she is buying me a present. I had thought it was not in her power to annoy me more, but this is the last straw. However, may the intention be accounted to her for righteousness. For by God, she needs it. The gaunt she-wolf of Washington. And that is the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. And perhaps this is a close to the Dr. Askin going mad chapter. It seems he's been deposited into a hospital, and it looks like that's where he's going to stay, because the whole pensions thing that they were talking about appears to be the way of financing him there for however long he'll stay, if not a really long time. So yeah, they've got the funds to support that now, it looks like. So that's good. All right, we will pick up on what looks like Tuesday, March 13th in our next episode, Robot Lady. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing before we end?
It sounds like a significant chapter is closing with Dr. Askin being taken to the hospital, which seems like a huge relief for Lewis and Mrs. Moore, despite all the painful moments leading up to it. It must feel like some weight has lifted. I'll be here next time to pick up where you leave off. Take care, Jeff.
All right, thank you. Take care, Robot Lady. Thanks for all of your help today, as usual. Thanks, everyone, for watching, for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always appreciated. Until next time. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone else within the sound of my voice, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance.